Hi, welcome back to Lisa's Stamp Studio. My name is Lisa Curcio. If you love card sketches or card layouts to help you with the mapping and the creating of your cards, you're going to love this one today. It's very different, but it's very, very easy. This is the winter card we're going to be creating together today, and I have several others to share with you, so make sure you hang with me to the end of the video. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I would love to encourage you to do so. Make sure you click the bell icon so that you'll get notifications when I upload a new video, as well as when I'm live right here on YouTube. Let's head over to the stamp table and let's get started on today's project. For this crisscross layout, let's start with a piece of designer series paper. This measures 4 inches by 5 1/4. I'm going to be using my Stampin' Trimmer to create the X in the middle of this designer series paper. Now let me give you some tips about this. First of all, my trimmer has a scoring and a cutting blade, so I'm going to make sure my scoring blade is up and out of the way. I'll navigate that cutting blade down. I'm going to be using the center black area here where I know the blade is going to travel to cut. I am going to cut from tip to tip. I'm going to align it inside that cutting track. Once I have that aligned, I can go ahead and I can close that door and I can slice. We're going to need to rotate this and do the other corner. Now here's where I want to share a couple tips with you. If this is challenging for you to keep them together, go ahead and grab yourself a Post-it note. And then once you have them perfectly aligned, which I'm going to do here, I'm looking at the tips, I'm going to place my Post-it note across the center to hold them in place. And then I can go ahead and navigate my tips inside that cutting track once again. Then once I'm happy with the alignment, I can go ahead and I can slice. That Post-it note is nice and thin, which means the trimmer is going to travel through it just beautifully. I'll remove the Post-it notes, and that's going to leave us with 4 pieces. It's these 2 wide pieces that I'm going to use for today's card. But the one thing I want to share with you about these leftover pieces is these 2 pieces can obviously be used for a different type of layout for another card. I'm going to push those off to the side for just a moment, and I cut myself a piece of smoky slate cardstock. This measures the same as the designer series paper, 4 inches by 5 1/4. I decided to use the Evergreen Forest embossing folder. This is a 3D embossing folder, and you'll notice that this is quite a bit thicker than a regular embossing folder. I'm going to navigate my cardstock in the folder all the way to the right where I know the trees are the tallest, and then I'm going to go ahead and pass this through my embossing machine. That now has left us with this. I've brought in my silicone craft sheet now to add the designer series paper angles. Now the easiest way, because we're going to need coverage here on the tips, is using the liquid glue. This glue is very strong and it does not dry completely clear. So I want you to make sure you use a very small amount, not too close to the edges. I like to go ahead and get it started here on my silicone craft sheet because adhesive, liquid glue, and hot glue will not stick to this. When this glue dries, it will turn opaque and I can simply rub it right off. Now that I know it's flowing very well, I'm going to go ahead and make a thin line of coverage around the outside. And again, I'm not going too close because I know as I press this down, that glue is going to ooze a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over and I'm navigating those points to the top left and the bottom left of that cardstock. The great thing about the liquid glue is it gives you a little bit of wiggle room before it sets and dries. And then I'm going to press that in place. I'm going to do the same thing now with this panel by flipping it over and then adding a little bit of liquid glue here around the perimeter. To make this easy for my hand, I'm going to go ahead and turn that cardstock horizontally, which is going to allow me to line up the top and the bottom edges as symmetrically as possible. I want to make sure that my centers are going to meet towards a point. Now that this layer is dry, I've gone ahead and I've cut another layer of purple posy cardstock, and I'm going to adhere these together. Because of the deep impressions and the 3D embossing folder, sometimes adhesives will have a habit of lifting up some of the cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use liquid glue for this as well. And the same thing as I did before, I'm going to go ahead and just use thin areas of glue. Now that I have this applied, I'm going to go ahead and place that on my silicone craft sheet as well, just in case I have any overage. And then I can mirror that purple posy cardstock underneath, leaving a thin border all the way around. These layers now are ready for the card base, which is a piece of Whisper White cardstock. This is 5 1/2 by 8 1/2. I did score it in half before you joined me. I like to use my bone folder for that nice crisp edge. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and use my adhesive. Now that I have my adhesive on the back, I'm going to go ahead and center this on the front of the card base. Now let's go ahead and work on our focal point. I have a piece of thick Whisper White cardstock here, and this is where I'm going to be doing my stamping. And I'm using the Freezing Fun stamp set. Really cute winter images. And the great thing about this stamp set is it has coordinating dies. And I've pulled one already out for the image that we're going to use. I have the Memento Black water-based ink pad here, which is going to work beautifully with my alcohol-based markers. I'm going to go ahead and ink up that raccoon and sled image, and I'll stamp that on my cardstock. I have an image already finished for you, but I want to talk you through some blending tips. So I've got my light and my dark, which is the combo of the Smoky Slate Stampin' Blends markers, and they are sold in a combination. They are dual tipped, so I'm going to choose my thicker side, which has a beautiful chiseled tip here. There is no right or wrong way, it is just a matter of preference. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to lay down my light color first. I'm going to omit the area around his stomach. I chose to leave that white. And I'm going to color this in very much like you would a regular dye-based marker. Alcohol markers require a few seconds for that alcohol to evaporate, for the color to process, become more of its true tone. And I'm going to add a little bit of color definition. I'm going to work here along the outside, and I'm going to stretch it across the hind here and across the leg. You could also add some definition here and here if you'd like. Just like the first time, you're going to need to let that sit for a few seconds so that alcohol can evaporate. And the secret to getting that beautiful blended look is to come back to your first shade. And in my case, that was the light. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull the dark into the light area. Now, it's not going to look like much right now because, again, it has to process. There is a coordinating die for this image as well. And I went ahead and I finished coloring it. And then I used that die to die cut the image, which left me with this. I used the purple posy combination for the hat and the scarf. I used the dark petal pink for the inside of his ears and his nose. And I used the crumb cake combination for the sled. And for the runners on my sled, I just used the light smoky slate. I was concerned he'd be a little bit lost on the base of the card. So what I did is I took a piece of vellum cardstock and one of the stitched shapes, which is the square, and I die cut myself a square. The Stitch Shapes is also one of my favorite die sets, not only because of the graduated sizes, but because you get 3 different shapes in the package. When I was done die cutting it, I ended up with this, and I thought this would be a great place to house my raccoon. I've got my card base here, and rather than put this on a square, I thought it would look a lot more interesting if I turned it on the diagonal. Because vellum is opaque, I was concerned about putting the adhesive where it might show. So let me give you a tip. I've got my raccoon image here, and I'm going to flip him over, and I'm going to use my Stampin' Dimensionals. Now, these are pre-cut pieces of foam tape, and that's going to help elevate this image and give it a real professional look. Once I added the dimensionals, I'm going to go ahead and use my Take Your Pick tool with that paper piercing tool attachment, and I'm going to remove those paper backings. Keeping this image on the angle, I chose to go ahead and add my raccoon to the center. I'm going to flip this over, and do you see where the original dimensionals are? Well, I'm going to add several others. You can add them directly on top of the other ones or in between. It really does not matter, as long as you have sufficient balancing. And then once again, we'll remove those backings. I have my image here, and I'm going to center it here over the center of those points. The greetings in this stamp set are really, really fun. So I chose the Sending Warmth Your Way for a fun winter wish. I stamped it on a piece of scrap white cardstock, and I just cut around it. It was nothing fancy. Because these dimensionals are going to be too large, I went ahead and I pulled out the mini dimensionals. And I love using these for these smaller areas. I'll place these so that they're balanced on the back of that greeting, and then once again, we'll remove those paper backings. I placed my greeting underneath the sled, just centering it the best that I could. And then to finish it off, I decided to use some of the adhesive backed sequins. Now these already have glue dots on the back. You'll see that this has a bit of a more iridescent, and these are a little bit more clear. And I chose these because I thought they highlighted the purple posy cardstock really well. Because they already have the glue dots on the back, it makes them really quick and easy to use. So I'll place several here on the card base, and then one more here at the bottom. I like to create a triangle for a really interesting focal image. Now let me share the other 2 cards I created using this exact same card layout. This one uses the In the Pines bundle, and you'll see that I heat embossed this tree as well as the greeting. I used the rectangle stitch dies here for the vellum and some beautiful designer series paper from the Most Wonderful Time medley. Just like this one, I did emboss the background, and I used the beautiful subtle embossing folder. And then finally, I have one here for the guys, a bit more masculine. Love to emphasize the foil here, which coordinates beautifully with this World of Good designer series paper. I also used the Beautiful World bundle, which is the stamp set and the coordinating dies, to make this congratulations card. I would love to know which of these is your favorite. Would you go ahead and leave me a comment below? And if you don't already have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and you are interested in receiving a copy of the current catalog, you can request one over at lisastampstudio.com under Catalogs. If you have enjoyed today's video, would you please give it a thumbs up here on YouTube, which is a like. It certainly helps. And I look forward to having you join me next time. Have a great day.